know if you guys are ready. Right, in 2016, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department issued body-worn camera videos, but body-worn cameras to all of our sworn officers. And at that time, we developed a policy that has gone through several iterations. To discuss changes that we make as we move forward is Deputy Chief Stella Patterson. She is our Deputy Chief over Administrative Services. And following up at the end of the press conference will be Chief Kerputney, who will discuss expectations as we move forward. This time I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Patterson. Chief Patterson.
Thank you, Brad. Good morning.
Good morning.
So as the Deputy Chief over Administrative Services, body-worn camera program is under my purview, as well as our professional standards. So I really just like to give you a little bit of information concerning the reforms that we have made with our BWC program. So as Brad stated, in 2016, we issued our cameras to all our patrol officers. In 2017, we expanded that to include our tactical officers, as well as our detectives, because they were having interactions with the community through secondary employment and other venues. Then in 2017, in July of 2017, we developed our professional standards unit. And that unit is really an oversight and a quality control unit to review our cameras, to review our footage, to ensure that our officers are complying with the law, complying with our policies and procedures, but also to look at opportunities in which we could do better in the areas of training and anything related to our work that we do. In December of 2017, we began capturing the information on our body-worn cameras through audits. So we developed a two-tier approach in doing that, beginning with our first-line supervisors. Every month, a monthly audit is done to ensure that our officers are complying with our policies and procedures. With that audit, the supervisor is looking at videos of every officer that is assigned to our divisions and also to our detective bureaus. In addition to that, we have a second tier with our body-worn cameras where our professional standard units is looking also and auditing the video. And with that, we have an EIS coordinator. I'm going to talk about EIS in just a little bit. But our EIS coordinator is reviewing cameras for our officers that we believe might be in a higher risk category. And then also they are looking at videos and auditing our felony arrests, our discretionary arrests, as well as our consent searches. We want to make sure as an organization that if there's an opportunity to see how we can do things better, to look at our officers are engaging the public, that we can do that. In addition to those audits, we are also looking to determine if our officers are using good de-escalation techniques. We have already identified video in that area where we see that our officers are employing the best techniques that they can, and we're using that for training purposes. Now, just to give you a little bit of context around our BWC and the encounters that we are having with the public, in 2018, we had 9,812 encounters with armed individuals. We successfully de-escalated 9,807 times where our officers didn't use any excessive kind of force, where our officers were not involved in a shooting incident or a critical incident. In 2019 year to date, we've had 2,407 armed encounters, and we have successfully de-escalated 2,405 of those. And we believe that we have been able to do that through some of our training and some of the things that we have employed as an organization. Now, around reform for our body-worn cameras, of course, there's been a lot of talk this week about the release of body-worn camera. So CMPD has always transmitted the relevant portion of the camera based on the petitioner's request. That is a legal standard, and we have followed that. But in the spirit of transparency, as an organization, we have changed our policy to where now we will be releasing all video relevant to an OIS or a critical incident. We believe that the legal standard, while it's a great standard, we should be more stringent and we should have a higher standard. And so in transparency, that's what we will be doing moving forward. Now, with our body-worn camera, as stated, we have our audits that we are doing to ensure that our officers are following our policies and procedures and trying to intervene as early as we can to de-escalate or to prevent any kind of issues that we're having. So another area of reform that we're looking at is our early intervention system. We have talked about that with the media before, but just to give you a little bit of highlights concerning that. In 2015, we partnered with the University of Chicago to develop a predictive model. It's a one-of-its-kind, only in early intervention system. We are one of the only agencies in the nation that is using this. This was a great use of technology when we partnered with University of Chicago to do this. And what makes our system a little bit different from everybody else is that we are not using what we call a threshold system, but instead we're using a machine learning system where we're analyzing a lot of data points on our employees. In fact, it's up to 1,100 data points, and by data points I mean that we are looking at the area where the officer works, how many calls for service they're responding to, how many arrests that they have made. We're looking at the demographics of the officer, their age, their experience in being an officer, and we're compiling all this information through an algorithm to determine if the officer is at a high risk for engaging in an adverse action. And when I say adverse action, I'm talking about perhaps an excessive use of force or an injury or a bad pursuit or a bad arrest. We want to minimize those at all costs, and we feel that with our early intervention system, we have been successful in doing that, and we will continue to reform it, we will continue to enhance it, and do what we have to ensure that we have the best outcomes when we are dealing with the public. So with our EIS system, as stated, we're using at least 1,100 data points to determine to see the probability of whether or not our officers will be involved in an adverse interaction. And with that, we have an EIS coordinator, a member of our command staff, that reviews and looks at those the risk scores that is assigned to every officer based on what is produced by that algorithm. We look at the officers, the top 5% of those officers on that list is evaluated on a daily basis, and if there is any activity or anything in action that may point towards an adverse interaction, or we believe that the officer may be engaged in something, supervisor will be notified, and then the supervisor will have an intervention with that officer. I believe that since we have had our EIS, we've seen a reduction in our complaints. From 2016 to 2019, which will be released soon in our IA report, we have seen a reduction in the number of complaints that we have received overall as a police agency, and I think our EIS system can be credited for some of that. And another area of reform that we're looking at is with our first aid, and I think our Chief of Police is going to talk a little bit about that. Chief?
Thank you, Chief Patterson. Don't go far. That's a lot of data. I'm sure there might be a few questions that you're going to have to entertain. Again, we're a learning agency. You've heard me say that before. We're always trying to get better. I think this week we improved, just to be quite frank with you. Obviously, whenever there's an officer-involved shooting, officer-initiated injury, we must render aid, and that's what we're talking about here. All of our people are CPR certified. We all have been trained on AED for defibrillator, but there are varying levels of experience that our people have wanting to do the right thing, gone out and gotten trained themselves, even to the level of EMT, many of whom are on our SWAT team, for instance. But again, our job is to get better. What cannot be more disheartening is watching a video, and we see a lot of them, and it appears that but for training, we could have rendered more aid. I can tell you the specific video of Mr. Franklin is a good example. Here's what we're trying to do. We're not only better improving our people and training them, but the police can't do it alone, obviously. We're talking in conversations with our fire department about not only the increase in the training, but also having them more available. Meaning, you get an armed person call, as Chief Patterson just talked about. We average roughly 9,000 of those a year. Having our fire department and our medic as well stage closer so that when the call comes out, we all respond, we go in, secure the scene, take care of the business that needs to be taken care of that is a threat to life, and then they're closer so that they can render aid if someone becomes injured. That's a big deal for us because, again, our job and our mission is preservation of life, and the only way to do that is to get better at our response. Another example of what our officers do trying to be better. Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, FLETC, we hosted them here back in 2017. 90 of our officers went in voluntarily to get advanced first aid training. Again, though, you're talking about 1,800 sworn officers and roughly 100 and 150 or so who might have a level of training that's higher. Our issue is when you spread that over 13 divisions, it's either hit or miss. We got to be better than that. We know we have to be better than that. And with our partners, the fire department and medic, we intend to be. So we're trying to get better. We're a learning agency. We must get better. That's a part of what we do philosophically. But also, I just wanted to give you a couple of practical examples of what improvement looks like. I am here to entertain any questions you might have.
Chief.
Here, yes, and then you, sir.
Taking you back to talking with fire and medic
Yes.
about, currently, what is the protocol?
Yes.
911 comes in, you guys go, and then you call?
Correct.
the medic?
Correct. We go, like an armed person call, we go in, we ascertain what exactly is going on. Once we secure the scene, if someone's injured, we call immediately for medical assistance, and then they roll. What we're trying to do is, what we intend to do is have them roll initially, stage a few blocks away, so that once we get there, if someone's injured, as soon as we get the scene secure, they can come in from a much shorter distance.
Is this because of what you saw on the officer involved shooting? Video?
That one in particular, and others that we've seen, yes, absolutely.
Chief, you said weeks ago that you told the public that you thought the video from the Franklin shooting should be released.
Correct.
And then your department only sent 2 minutes and 20 seconds of that to a judge for review. Why should the public trust you in the future when you talk about issues dealing with transparency? Why should we trust you to be transparent?
Well, you should trust us to be responsibly transparent. People forget that word. The issue is this. I'm going to do everything I said, and I said this very succinctly, I think, before, to seek justice. A part of that is not disclosing information that might harm our ability to fully investigate or prosecute a case. So what I'm going to do, even if it's not popular, is continue to do that. However, our policy is to put everything out, but I'm still going to request through the judge that certain things are redacted and certain things are not going to impact the ability to seek that justice. So we're still going to have recommendations even if we're putting all the video out.
A judge is currently considering holding you in contempt on the notion that you may have violated a court's order.
Sure.
Your lawyers never in court stood up at the first hearing and they said, we don't object to the release of the video. You didn't ask for certain parameters. You didn't ask for only this portion of the video. So again, at no time until you released the video did you or your lawyers ever say, we don't think the full video should be released. You said the video should be released. And then you said, we want to be transparent.
Sure.
So again,
Can I
why should we-
respond?
well,
That's
why
a long
should we
question.
trust you to-
Sure.
Why should we trust your characterization in the future?
Sure. Mainly because I keep telling you, and apparently people don't hear me, we always meet the legal standard. And that was how we approached it. We looked at specifically what the petition asked for, which I don't think is sufficient anymore. So what we're doing now, the change and improvement is put out everything, ask for redactions, talk specific to the impact on the investigation or the pursuit of justice through court, and leave it into the hands of a judge. So what we had been doing is specifically looking at, within the law, what the petition asked for and giving that.
If that's the legal standard, why is a judge considering holding you in contempt for not following a judge's order?
Well, I believe that that'd be a question for the judge, which is why it's in the courts in the first place. But I believe our interpretation was accurate. I believe we did meet the legal standard, and that's why it's in the court now to determine whether or not our previous position was indeed the right one.
Only 6 officers in the last year have been disciplined solely for violations of the body-worn camera video. Chief Patterson talked about the thousands of audits that the department has done. Are you representing that only 6 officers violated or were disciplined or only didn't follow the body-worn camera policy?
Not at all. What I can tell you is those that we find, we hold accountable. And I think 6 is not accurate. My understanding is we had about 11.
We had 13 total. I said only for violations of the body-worn camera.
Sure,
The other
sure.
7 were disciplined for a range of things,
Sure.
including the body-worn camera.
Correct.
But if you're doing thousands of audits a year, how thoroughly of a look is your department taking at the adherence to that policy if we see it's catching only 6 officers solely for violations of body-worn camera video?
Sure. It's a matter of what you compare it to. Prior to, we were catching none. So I think having 13 now is an improvement. And the issue is, it was 11 officers, 13 allegations that contribute to the body-worn camera. And the range of discipline is from a written reprimand all the way up to 240 hours of suspension.
The sole
So
violations of
if I can
the
finish,
body-worn
sir, I'll
camera
listen to your
were
question. Let me
written
finish.
reprimands.
So what I'm saying is, we do hold them accountable, and we take it very seriously, and we continue to improve. Yes, sir.
The 6 who were only found to have
Yes.
sustained allegations of not following the policy only received written reprimands.
Okay.
do you believe there's room for additional improvement in your audit process and your, your efforts to make sure officers are complying with the body camera policy?
I think there's room for improvement in everything. That's why we're a learning agency. That's why we always want to improve. That's why this week in particular, I think we became better, because we're always looking to be better. I keep saying we can meet the legal standard. We want to be better than that. And even in body-worn camera and how we hold people accountable, yes, we want to improve. But I can tell you the vast majority of people are adhering to our policy. Those that don't, when we catch them, obviously, as you can see, based on the data, we hold them accountable. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you've answered this before, but this is the first time I've been able to ask you. Sticking with the Burger King, the officer involved shooting, what happened to the second camera?
Okay, the only officer with an activated camera that caught the incident is the one that we released, Officer Curl. So anybody else who was on the scene during the incident, it's going to have to be investigated internally. I can't speak to that because personnel laws require that we do an investigation and you can get the adjudication thereof. So right now, the only one that we know that was active and operating is the one that has been released, which is Officer Curl.
Is the investigation complete on your end? Has it been turned over to the DA's office?
No, it has not been. By the end of the week, it should be turned over to the district attorney.
Chief,
There you are. How are you, sir?
I'm Heidi. Nick was talking about trust and we, and I guess it's implicit, but I think that the bigger question is the community trust.
Yes.
Where are we with the community's level of trust given the developments in the last couple of weeks?
It depends on how you measure it. I haven't seen any recent survey results. I know we're going to be doing that. I think the city has already established that. It should be coming in, I don't know when, but we used to do them every year, and now the city's going to take that responsibility holistically. I'll tell you this, it depends on where you're talking and specifically about whom. I know we have more work to do in our minority communities. That's been consistent ever since I've been here, and it hadn't really changed today. I think we've made some improvements. They haven't been significant, and they're definitely not enough. So I can tell you the vast majority of the people in this community have trust for the police. Every time we see this data, we see that based on the survey. However, we're not good enough, and that's why we're talking about getting beyond just the legal standard. We have to have more trust. We have to be better. We have to continue to improve.
Chief,
Yes, ma'am.
last week Mayor Lyles came out with a statement that said that council was inadvertently shown the full footage. But sitting through the hearing yesterday, it sounds like it was intentionally disclosed through the city manager. The city attorney said it was okay to disclose this to the council. So what's your response to that claim that they were inadvertently shown this footage? It sounds like they were intentionally shown this footage.
I haven't really spoken to the mayor, so I don't know. I just think the city manager wanted them to see it, and everything that was shown was shown. I don't know what exactly was inadvertent. I do know maybe the confusion is what was sent to the courts is not exactly what they saw. So maybe the assumption is that they saw more by accident. That was not the intent.
Chief,
Yes.
back to the first aid.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me, you said that the officers are obligated to render aid, right?
Based on their training and experience. What I said is they must request medical assistance from professionals, fire and medic. If they have training and experience, and if we've secured the scene, then they can use that level of experience to render aid based on their training and experience and certifications.
So bottom line is they at least have to call medics.
They must immediately call for medical assistance from a professional, yes.
And only if they're able to, if they're have an expertise in CPR.
Trained, certified, equipped. Right.
Only then can they. If they don't
CPR is everybody, so if we think they're not breathing or they're having their heart stopped or something like that, you're gonna activate CPR as soon as you secure the scene. But for a lot of everything else, like a gunshot in particular, there has to be a higher level of training to really know how to deal with internal bleeding and such.
Are you anticipating people, some people will be upset when they see the rest of the body-worn camera?
I can't speak to other people. I just testified in court, and that would be the improper response. What I'll tell you is, I know I don't like how it looks, and I think I'm pretty reasonable. So I think most reasonable people would want to see better.
Even CMS now is in their active shooter training for all the schools is teaching the most basic first aid for bleeding. Police undergo no training like that at all?
Okay, let me try this slowly. We train all of our people in basic CPR and how to respond to medical issues on the basics. And if you are not aware, I want you to know we are training CMS in active shooter. Therefore, the basic that we're given is what we are aware of. My issue is that's the very minimum. I want to be better than that. And that's what we're doing with the connection to fire and medic, to at least stage better and to go through additional training. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna ask, so is it fair to say that Officer Curl and Officer Deal both should have known how to perform CPR?
CPR? Yes. CPR.
But there's a
That's
difference between CPR and a shooting and a bleeding situation.
Absolutely.
So they're trained in CPR, but no training on first aid, tourniquet, anything like that, direct pressure, anything.
Incorrect. They are trained on tourniquet. But again, internal bleeding, sir, is not as simple as doing CPR or a
Right.
tourniquet, especially if it's to the torso. It's a bit more complicated, which is why medic has an extensive amount of training that most of our people do not.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
hopefully, ask this in a way you can answer this.
Sure.
You got to see the one body camera video. You said that the other officers that were on scene, we only got to capture one video from the shooting. I guess when you realized that we only had that.
Let me say it this way. Let me try. I think I know where you're going, all right? You got two people on scene, two officers.
Right.
You got one video. So the
Like I
internal,
said, when you realized there was only one video.
Yes.
Your level of frustration, disappointment, what, knowing that protocol.
I'm a
was it?
professional. Why do you think I was disappointed? Yeah, it is, I want to make sure people get the message how serious we send it. And I think that message will be received as it has been in the way we mete out discipline in other areas around BWC. I think this will be no different, but this is an internal investigation that has to be investigated. There's two people, one camera, obviously an internal investigation is looking for what is missing. All right, appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Hey, did you, if you could, for them, just so to clarify, because and I was half in and out, no surprise there.
Sure.
On CPR, this wouldn't have been appropriate in this situation, given that Mr. Franklin had a pulse and was breathing.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I don't want anyone to misunderstand what she said, how it would have been appropriate for either Officer Pearl or Deal to administer CPR. That wouldn't apply here, would it?
No, it certainly wouldn't, and I think once y'all see the video that will be released at 5 o'clock today, that you'll see that officers took the necessary precautions based on the training that we have been given.
Tourniquet couldn't be applied because
No.
it was to the torso.
And that's one other thing that we forgot to mention, that officers are issued tourniquets, which are used to help stop heavy bleeding on appendages. So none of that would have been applicable to this situation,
There's
so,
also direct pressure to put on an open wound.
correct. Yeah, visible wounds, yes, sir.
Right. So in this case, there were no visible wounds.
I'm not going to get ahead of speaking about the video. You'll have to see that when it gets released.
Lieutenant, could you clarify, I think I missed the beginning of Rob. Could you explain why, I guess, CPR couldn't have been done because, in that particular instance?
Well, CPR is only, so you're asking me about my training that I've gone through? Is this a pop quiz?
Well, no. I
No,
guess
certainly,
what I'm asking
if you're
is-
breathing and you have a pulse, CPR is not applicable. So I'll leave it at that. You have to be not breathing, and you don't have to have a pulse. You do not have a pulse, and then you begin CPR.
Are officers trained in their CPR training to check over the minutes that they might be on scene with the victim, to recheck for the airway breathing circulation protocol before it
Absolutely, yeah. We receive training every 2 years from the American Heart Association. That's done through our academy. So all officers, all sworn officers do have that certification.
But as part of their training, in your experience, would it be appropriate to recheck for that airway, breathing, and circulation after making an initial assessment to see if CPR becomes appropriate as a person might deteriorate?
Yes, exactly. Yes, sir.
So the officer should check on a victim more than once if they're on the scene with them for several minutes, is what I'm asking.
I would think so, yes, sir. Okay, we got any other questions about maybe a shooting from last night?
I want to go right field when you're done with all that. Something else.
You're gonna go where?
Completely different, to right field.
Oh, right, all right.
Yes, sir.
Picking daisies out there, go ahead.
They just mowed, no daisies. The question, though, is yesterday we reported on the shootings, 4 within 15 minutes.
Right.
2 groups shooting at each other. What have we learned since yesterday, if anything? It would seem that you should be able to figure out pretty much who is involved if they known targets. Where are we with all that?
I can tell you, we are conducting a comprehensive investigation into those shootings. We do believe at this point that at least 3 out of the 4 are related. And we have recovered evidence at all 4 scenes which seem to indicate that all 4 may be related at this point due to the proximity and some other evidence that we've recovered. We are working with our special operations, with our crime analysis, patrol, investigative unit, detectives within the divisions, as well as other state agencies to actively work on those cases. So we are, in fact, they're meeting upstairs right now to discuss those cases. So we are actively working those.
It would seem that you would have people who were, if their targets would know the people who are shooting at them, you're getting cooperation.
I would think, I would characterize cooperation as less than ideal. So, we're working through other avenues to try to work these cases. Obviously, the easiest way to investigate cases was when you have cooperating individuals because they were generally there during the incidents. But when we do not have that, we continue to forge ahead and work through other ways. Okay. Any other questions?
Anything else, Coleman?
No. That's it. Thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate it. Have a good day.